All right, so I'm gonna now try and tackle the heating unit that runs to the back of the bus that usually don't really work very well in the buses. So I'm gonna show you kind of my process and hopefully not hit too many snags. So this is the heating unit I have to take out, and it runs the coolant lines over here, and then there's actually a little dip down here into a little cavity that's under the bus, which I don't fully understand why that's even there, but it dips down there and then it goes back out here under the bus. So what I had to do is go under the bus and trace these lines all the way across, and actually it goes all the way to the front area of the bus, and there's two shutoff valves that'll show you. So I traced my lines through the bus, and these two shutoff valves, which I'm gonna have to label which one's in and which one's out, but eventually they're gonna get just cut and spliced together with one shutoff. So that way my coolant system still works properly, but I don't have anything feeding to the back. So now that I have them shut off, I can take these lines out, and actually I need to have a bucket to drain the coolant into. So just make sure you have a big bucket to be able to drain coolant, and then you can start ripping out all your things from under the bus and figure out your configuration for recoupling them so your coolant system works. Alright, so when you're disconnecting, make sure you have two buckets, basically one that goes around these parts, and then one that you can drain the hoses into. When I took the first one off, I got a lot of drainage from this guy. So just make sure you have two buckets, a little small one to catch this. It dumps out quite a bit, but you can use your big bucket too. All right, so I've got these guys out. So all my tubing's out of the bus. Through it out window here. A lot more tubing to go. All right, so I have the tubing out that I want out, and I took out these little brackets that are under here that attach, letting this guy finish draining. But I'm just gonna keep these pipes in here, ran all the way under, for now at least. I don't feel like taking them out if I don't have to. I'm gonna talk to a mechanic, but just use one of the brackets that I pulled off and reconnect these two pipes together. All right, so I got all rehooked up. I used two of these little corner brackets and then an extender pipe to each, because if I didn't, then these lines were really kinked. So at some point I'll have to get a bracket to tie this up to the bottom of the bus just so it stays secure. And then I'll have to run it and make sure it's got no leaks, but unfortunately I think one of my valves is kind of shot, so it drained like all of my coolant. So I'll have to replace that and then test it. All right, so now that I've got my coolant, my mechanic recommended Prestone. He recommended a different one than this. He recommended the Command, but they didn't have really any. So I just got the regular Prestone, heavy duty. We'll fill this thing up, get it started, and make sure we have no leaks. We'll also move it. That way I make sure everything works well, because I think it's starting to sink into the ground. So we'll avoid that. Let's get her drunk. All right, so about once a week I have to start the bus and kind of move it for multiple reasons. So got my keys here, and first reason is, especially down here in Florida, the ground can get really wet, and I'll show you under here. So you can see there's some ruts in the ground there. I hadn't moved it for about 2 weeks, and it kind of sank into the ground. But another reason is I also have to make sure that my brakes don't lock up, because last time I let it sit for too long, it took me a few minutes to get the brakes to break loose with all the rust. And then finally, you can see there with the air pressure, so there's two different air pressures, this one and this one. They both run on the same system, but you need to make sure both of those are up to this point. So this is the parking brake air, which is this lever. So if you let it get too low, you'll have a hard time getting the air brake off. And then the second one down here is your just regular brake. So when you're driving, if it gets too low, you're gonna have a hard time braking. It won't stop as easily. So you just gotta turn it on every once in a while. So just gotta turn it on. And watch those air pressures come up. So a bunch of lights are on, but mostly that's just because the air pressure's low. So you can see it's starting to rise. So once it gets up to this point where you see that little symbol, we'll hear a sound, and that just kind of tells us that the brakes are good to go. And I can take the air brake off, and then the regular brakes will work just fine as well. So you can see some of those pressure things went off. So that brake tells me that the air brake is on. I got a check engine light over there that I'll have to figure out. And then I don't know what that little blinking guy is, but I think it just has something to do with the safety equipment that all got disconnected. So we're getting close here. So we'll hear it go off here in a second. So once it gets to its spot, we'll hear it make a sound. There you go. So now you know the brake is ready to take off. So all you have to do is put your foot on the regular brake and then hit that brake. And you can see it releases some of the pressure. And all I have to do is just put it in drive, move forward a little bit just so I'm using all my equipment. I'll go back for a second. Whee! Yep, there you go. So that is the process, and then we just put the brake back on. So now I know everything's kind of running. I'll let it run for a few minutes just to get fluids through all the lines and all that. But then we'll just turn it off and start it up next week. Another aspect to this is also when you move it, you want to make sure that you move it far enough and stop it in a different spot so that one part of the tire is not sitting on the ground all the time. Because if I had this parked here for the next 6 months before moving it again, or if every time I moved it, I pulled it back to the same exact spot, we'd have a flat spot in every single tire on this car. So every time I move it, it helps relieve that pressure, and then I have no flat spots.